I'm liking the time to really think about where am I going to land with this? You know, we don't want to go back to the unjust normal, but there's an invitation here to create something else, and that's appealing to me.
Hmm. You know, one of the things I totally get it. This idea of risk assessment fatigue. You know, and Priya Parker, who wrote The Art of Gathering, calls it, as Carrie has reminded me, micro rejections. The idea of like, you know, you go to maybe hug someone and they say, rah! And,
it's happened.
It's an awkward time. It's an awkward time. It's certainly liminal. I got to spend the weekend with someone named Richard Rohr this last weekend for 3 nights, just 6 or 7 of us here in New Mexico. And he said, you know, when you're in a state of liminality, as we are culturally right now, it does wear you down. So let's talk for a minute about resilient circles, because this is something that came out of my reading of your book, 55, Underemployed and Faking Normal. Spectacular book, by the way, that came out a few years ago. First edition came out with one. Yep, there you go. And then came out. It was so popular, a publisher picked it up. A major publisher picked it up, especially after your TED Talk. I don't even remember.
Yes.
But long story short is, in the book you talk about resilient circles, which is something that you relied upon back, you know, a dozen years ago. Talk about what's a resilient circle and how might it be actually helpful right now?
And so let me tell you just like a little bit about my story. So I'm someone, I was doing really well until the Great Recession of 2008. And all of a sudden, I had 2 big consultancies that I'd had for many years. What happens in a recession? There's a retrenchment. And who goes first? The consultant. So I lost both these jobs within 6 months. And I suddenly went from a really good income that I had been counting on and had a lifestyle that sort of fit with that, to 0 in my mid-50s, and not really worried. I've got lots of props and credentials, Harvard MBA, World Bank, etc. Phone wasn't ringing. I wrote an essay that described what it's like to land here, what it feels like to suddenly be on the outside of a life that you've always known. And the essay went viral. That is what kind of led to the book and this journey that I'm on now. What saved me during that period was having a group of people that I could be candid with, that I could tell the truth of what was really happening to me, the embarrassment of it, I at one point, because this went on for a couple of years, I got to where I was on food stamps at one point, where my mortgage, was I going to be able to hang on to my house, etc. And the resilience circle, you don't need a cast of thousands for it. You need 3, 4 people that you can talk candidly about what is really happening to you. And here's why it matters. And it's also not therapy. I want to say it's not a therapy session. And we shared a lot of information. I think I mentioned to you, Chip, yesterday that it's also not therapy. I want to say it's not a therapy session. And we shared a lot of the.
Some weird Zoom is doing some weird funky things right now. There's a couple of you guys I can't mute, and it just rewound Elizabeth's audio for no reason whatsoever. So everybody mute yourself, and Zoom just loved it so much it decided to play it back for us.
Play it again.
Yeah.
So the reason having people that you can really tell the truth to is that what I find is this is crazy making, this period, you know, where you are underemployed or unemployed. We live in a culture that doesn't talk about this. This is happening to a lot of older Americans. You feel by yourself, you get full up with emotion. Then what happens is you do get an interview or you have an opportunity to talk to somebody about a project, and you're actually leaking all of that tension and upset. And the person sitting across from you, they don't know what it is about you, but they know whatever the energy you're bringing, they don't really want it on their team or their project or in their company. what I found the Resilience Circle did is I could talk about what was really happening in the most candid terms, and they had already been through something like that. So then when I did have an opportunity to present, when I did have an opportunity to go to Simon and Schuster and sit with their people and talk about my book idea, I'm not leaking my upset. I'm composed in there. I'm operating from my center. And I think the other thing with resilience circles is, we live, it's so individualistic in this country. Everybody needs their own snow blower, their own car, their own vacuum cleaner. There are a lot of us older, we're gonna need help from friends. I don't mean like, come have a coffee with me. I mean, I'm moving out of my apartment and I can't afford ABC moving guys. Can you come and help me move the small things? We're gonna need the kinds of friendships that inconvenience us sometimes and inconvenience others sometimes. And the resilience circle kind of gets at the realness of what it means for many of us to be aging where we're in more financial jeopardy than we thought we would ever be in.
Yeah, just to be able to borrow some money from a friend, it can be a very awkward situation. You know some of the stats around elder poverty and about how little we have prepared for retirement. I mean, maybe give a couple statistics if you can think of them, Elizabeth, and then I have another question for you.
So the median retirement savings for people 55 to 64, median, so typical, is $60,000. $60,000, kind of like wrap your brain around it. So I'm Black woman, 60 in reasonably good health is gonna live till 81. And there's no scenario where that kind of math works. And this is where when you talk, one of my favorite people is Teresa Ghilarducci, who's a labor economist. She does really good work on this. She's estimating that half the people, who are now 55 are going to be looking at downward mobility when they're 65. So poverty or near poverty conditions. And it's just not a conversation we're having. And what I would say to those in this room with us, let's say it's not you. I bet you can think of somebody in your friendship circle, somebody in your family. They used to be okay. Now they're not okay.
And they're faking normal.
And they're pretending like they're okay. And it may be you who is pretending they're okay because there's so much pressure to do it.
It's interesting as you're talking about this, Elizabeth, there was a word that I talk about in my book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, the confidant. So I want to unpack this with you for a second. So there was a French mentee of mine, actually a direct report of mine at Airbnb. And she said, I appreciate that you're my confidant, Chip. And I said, well, you haven't given me any juicy details yet. So I'm not your confidant. Give me some good stuff. And she said, no, I don't mean that, although I'll give you some good stuff. But what I actually mean is, where I come from, she said, someone who's a confidant is the person who gives you confidence. So a confidant may be somebody who, in your resilience circles, there's somebody who can actually hear your truth and your challenges and be there for you in a supporting safety net kind of way, giving you emotional insurance. Not just property and liability insurance, but emotional insurance. But they are giving you something even more than that. They are giving you confidence again. Because what happens for so many of us is we have a crisis of confidence, partly because the world of what looks successful in America looks very different than we look, etc. Any thoughts on that?
No, so true. Sometimes it's also reminding you of who you are. Because in these moments, I was telling him, I loved the piece he did the other day where he talked about you, Chip, the books that your sister gave you at a point of despair and how it had the little light bulb. She was reminding you who you are. She was reminding you that she knows kind of what you have to offer. And sometimes when we land here and those tapes start running, and what I call awfulizing, you know, and parade of horribles, that you need someone who is going to remind you of what you've accomplished, remind you of your talents, remind you of the insights that they know that you have. And that is confidence giving. And so in the resilience circle, because very often it may start with like a few friends of yours, but it may not even be your tightest friends. Because sometimes your tightest friends are not the ones who want to let you grow and change. Okay, your tightest friends are the ones who are reminding you or shaming you. So I've had people tell me they'd rather have a resilience circle with people they didn't actually know that well. So
welcome to MEA. I mean, that's right. What a workshop is often about.
Right. Yes.
Wow. What's juicy for you these days? Like, what is it? What is in general or specific to the idea of aging and longevity, and what does it mean to be the triple whammy of older women, a woman, and a Black person?
No, this is, yeah, it is all these isms that, so I think it maybe means I process the ageism a little differently because it's not my first rodeo. I am accustomed to walking into a room and people having opinions about me, good, bad, you know, either as a woman, as a Black woman, and now as I've been, you know, after struggling, do I have my gray hair or not? And deciding now that I'm going with my gray hair. So I, in a blink, people now put the age on me. So I feel, as I was saying, I like this period. As my own situation has stabilized, I'm looking for what is a casserole of interesting work. I think it's, as we get older, we may get that W-2 long bread job that we used to have, but a lot of us will not. A lot of us are going to be looking at a casserole of work. Hopefully it can be, at least some of it, aligned with the values that are important to us. So as I will never step out of telling my personal story. So many people say, thank you for at least saying what's happening to many of us. So I will always be there. I also now want my personal story to inform policy, to be in an advocacy position. I'm fascinated by what's coming up from the bubbling up from the ground. You know, in the absence of a comprehensive federal policy, there's some interesting things that people are doing, that communities are doing. And I'm looking for an affiliation, because, you know, I've been kind of paddling my little canoe now for a few years. And, you know, who has a megaphone that maybe I can lend my voice to? So in the process of looking at that, in the process of writing more, I don't know if I can do all the books you're doing, Chip. I'm just like,
let's do a book together.
Ooh. Now, that would be like that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Hold that.
You guys heard it here.
Hold that. And then do a tour.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. The sassy tour.
Yes.
You know, so are there any bright lights out there, organizations, companies that you can look at, or are there any that you're seeing, and what are some ideas you have of how companies could be a little bit more longevity savvy, meaning like we live in an era where people are living longer, and yet somehow, you know, Madison Avenue still does all their advertisement for 25-year-olds.
So one organization I really like is the National Council on Aging. And the reason, so Ramsey Alwyn, who heads that up, is really very practical on older adults in financial jeopardy. That is their core mission. They are doubling down on that, and she is leading them into the future. So I've always, she used to be at AARP. She's now back at the NCOA, and she's good. And so like watch them and see where they're going to be going in the next few years. There's some interesting, a couple, I think this one organization is called Alive, where, because one of the things that may surprise people is that the number of older entrepreneurs, and not only older, when you look at the Kaufman data, it's kind of something like a quarter of new entrepreneurs are over, 55, 50 or 55.
55, I think it is, yeah.
And they're successful. You would sort of think, oh, it's the kid in their parents' garage that's the one who's gonna be successful. But they're actually, these older entrepreneurs are more successful. And this was a Northwestern study which looked at, over 1 million businesses. Mm-hmm. So Alive, and I keep seeing similar organizations where they are looking to either incubate older adults who have ideas of products and services for older Americans, or they are doing market studies. Because I mean, we need more than, I was saying to you yesterday, pill dispensers and, all of the stuff that they're, making for us. I am not I'm 67. I'm not my grandmother's 67. I'm not my mother's 67. And I think there's a big corporate play here as well. I mean, when you look at how much money we spend, older adults over 50, and you look at, like, even in categories, cars, trucks, entertainment, frozen food, we're like, 50% or more. And if we're not working, if we can't afford, I said to someone, I don't have to go to a restaurant. I don't have to buy new clothes. we don't have to do that. And we are driving the numbers for some of these companies on their profitability. And they're not paying attention to us. And some of this is that shame keeps us quiet. There are a lot of us. Shame keeps us siloed and quiet, and we're not demanding more from companies that are making money off of our, aggregated dollars. And I would say it's not even just us. Gen Xers are not going to have retirement income either. Millennials definitely are not going to have pensions. So I'm excited about who are the companies that are leading the charge here. I'm not so interested in the laggards. As women, we know the companies that never wanted to hire women, and they always needed more data, and you had to keep making the case. Forget those companies. It's forever with them. Who are the companies that are out front? How do we start convening them? How do we give them the megaphone? How do we start pushing I hear politicians, they're older than me, and they're talking about seniors like those people, and they're older than we are on this call. So there is a lot of work to be done here. I met Chip some years ago through a dear friend of mine, Judith Adu, and was immediately struck by this reframing of how the concept of a modern elder. What does it mean to think about this period in a way that we have not before? We are the first who will live as long. So many of us will live as long as we do. And there's actually no roadmap. We are making this path by walking. MEA is like, okay, here's some guideposts that we should be thinking about. And there's an invitation to organizations and companies that are doing the same thing. And they're out there. It's just not like this big convening, but I'm hearing of both in the, definitely on the nonprofit side.
Mm-hmm. So I have one more question for you, and then I'll let you bring up any last things before we go to Q&A, and I have to drop off. So when you're 10 years from now, I know it's hard to predict where we're going to be 10 years from now, but where are you going to be living? And how do you, are you moving into a retirement community? Are you going to be staying at home? Are you going to move into a regenerative community with MEA? What is important to you, and what does the senior living world or the world of community developers need to do to create something that would be even interesting to you, including what about maybe in urban markets?
When my mother died now almost 4 years ago, and before she died, I was taking her around. We actually had hired this woman who was taking us around to all these different continuing care facilities. These were like cruise ships on land. If you walked in and you saw a little coffee pot, Mr. Coffee, and a table, and you said, "What's that over there?" And they said, "Oh, that's the bistro." You knew the monthly fee just went up $2,000 because that's the bistro. These places were like $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month. Right now, most of us are not going to be able to afford to do that. So in my case, I live where I've lived for 30 years. So my monthly expenses are like really, really low, but it does have steps and stairs. Right now, it benefits me to go up and down, but maybe it won't always. The vision I sort of have, I think I've heard younger people call it a work from anywhere life. So I'm interested in my book. When I updated it, I went to Mexico. There were a group of women who said, we can't live on Social Security, Americans here. We're here and we're living on my $1,200 Social Security check, and it's pretty good. And I said, how is that possible? They said, come see us. And so in the book, I write about them. So that community may not be the one, but maybe it's Portugal, Panama. Maybe there's a way for me to, in DC and other places, they have something now they're calling the Golden Girls Act, which gets around the zoning. A lot of can't have what they would call a boarding house of unrelated adults living together. So DC and some other cities are looking at ways to solve two things: affordability and isolation and loneliness. We're older adults, a lot, this, they call us elder orphans. I don't know if I like that term, but that's the term I've seen, to make it possible in terms of the zoning and ordinances for us to come together in, a group living situation. And again, so I've been sort of toying around with my mind. There are a few friends, and again, these are my closest friends. I don't want to live with them. Okay, those aren't the ones. But there's my circle that's outside my tightest circle, kind of more alignment in values. I'm thinking I could live with Eddie and Jacqueline. That might work. So I'm open to some sort of co-living. I've been keeping my eye out on, there's a woman, Jewel Pearson, who has really introduced the tiny house movement, I think, to Black women, because we were, I don't know if I want to be in rural North Carolina by myself. And so she is looking at partnering with Black farmers where you could have your house there. So I just, kind of toss out I don't feel like I have to live in this house where I'm sitting right in front of it. I'm open to considering things. And one of the things I'd like to see a National Council on Aging or an AARP do is give us, what are the options of how we can live other than $8,000 a month in some cruise ship?
Mm. Do you know that you're a sexy, geeky modern elder? You are a sexy, geeky modern elder. I love how you just pull these facts and details. This is why you and I get along so well. And maybe we will write a book someday, because we are sort of similar in that way. I don't know if I'm sexy. I'm probably not that, but I am geeky for sure when it comes to some of these facts. I have to jump on. Speaking of geeky, I have to go and do a call with Amazon because they want me to give a speech to Amazon employees. I don't know how many, but there's a lot of them around the subject of intergenerational collaboration. So we're doing a little session on that. Any last question or thought from me, Elizabeth, before I jump off, and then the rest of you can, as many of you as want to stay, can stay and ask questions to Elizabeth and talk further. Elizabeth, anything from me?
No, this is delicious. I'm gonna keep sticking you on this book idea. You're about the only way it would ever happen. It would, we could rock that.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. All right, guys. So good to see everybody. I'm in Santa Fe. And for those of you who've been coming here as Corazon members the last couple of weeks, and another group coming tomorrow, thanks for checking out what we're doing here a couple of years before we open. So see you soon. And I'll let Carrie continue on with Elizabeth and everybody else.
Thank you, Chip. I told you guys that was popcorn worthy. So let's go ahead and everybody go to the right-hand corner, pop it in the gallery view, and then I will take off our spotlights, but then you should see Elizabeth and I kind of up in the corner. And so now is your chance to, let me get rid of my spotlight. Hold on, let's get rid of all these. There we go. Okay, so that was great, Elizabeth. I love that you touched on a bunch of these topics that we're all talking about. And there was a bunch of really great questions in here. And I want to grab one of them. So I got to go back and find it about, and I know you have some of these stats in your head, Elizabeth, about the information on Social Security is so scary. So what happens to those of us of Social Security age in 2035? And so I'd love to hear you kind of address some of that, because that's up for everybody in this room.
Yeah, so I am not a Social Security geeky person. That's a whole, but here's what I think, that they cannot let that go over the cliff. It, in terms of, I'm African-American, just with African-Americans, it puts half of African-Americans who are over 65 into poverty, just boom, just like that. And it is so essential that I think they are going to have to figure it out. And that's where we have the numbers to really start pressuring that the clock doesn't run out and there's some kind of gap, or there's a 25% cut. I'm meeting people who are getting less than the average, and 20% cut puts them right underwater.
Yep. And what was the stat you told me about the retirement for African-American women over 65?
So the median wealth for African-American women 60 and older is $11,000. And that's for educated Black women, or women who have a bachelor's degree. That was a sobering and staggering number. The numbers are not good for many of us, but that one was, I had to like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, whoa, everybody get that in our heads. So I love that you're turning your interest to advocacy work, and it's so important. And it's not something that we can, as a generation, kick down the can, hope that somebody else is going to figure it out, because time's going to be running out, and advocacy is really, really, really important. So anybody wants to ask a question, just raise your little hand button, and I'm happy to bring you guys into the conversation for a little bit of extra time. So anybody have a question or a comment that you want to throw into our dialogue here? Yes, Carolyn, and then we'll grab Alessandra. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Such a great topic, and so much thinking out of the box. I have a nursing background, and I didn't think that if we go live in other countries, we can use Medicare, commercial Medicare lookalikes like AARP Medicare Complete. I thought we had to pay cash, or perhaps there's some other vehicle, but has anyone heard more about, and I did love it, the tip was an AARP. I mean, I'm really happy that our group is surfacing higher and higher, but
So
would stop me if, or, you know, I mean, sure, you can come back to the United States, but if you're really sick at the end, how can you get here?
So to paraphrase, a broader question is, when Elizabeth talked about maybe Portugal, Panama, certainly many people in this age bracket are thinking about moving out of the country because it's probably more affordable. And your question is, how do you make that work financially? And I don't know if you're an expert in that either, Elizabeth, but I'll let you
no. So what I found in, I was in San Miguel Allende. And what I found is that people were, well, one, doctors made home visits. Doctors gave you their cell phone number. There was a public system and a private system, and it was much more affordable. And people were also doing some kind of non-traditional acupuncture kinds of things. And then when they needed something major, they were actually just hopping over the border back to Texas. A woman that I spent a fair amount of time with broke her wrist and then was back in and went to the public system, and it was, you know, $15 or something for them to put the, they actually did surgery on it. And when she got to New York and it worked perfectly well. And the doctor was looking at it and they said, we haven't used this in 20 years. And so it wasn't the newest thing, but her wrist worked perfectly and she paid very little money for it. So, you know, that's how they were working, how that was working there. Much easier, to your point, to hop across the border to Texas than if you're in Portugal or somewhere.
Right. Yeah, these are great questions. And so, Alessandra, did you still have a question? I'm going to go over to Aisha. You do. Okay, go.
Yes, I do. I was just wondering, since you probably talked to other peers who are in the same situation, how much do you think the situation was due to the fact that you were older, as opposed to maybe a race or sex issue?
So here's what the data says. There's a great study by Urban Institute and ProPublica. And what they found out is that 52% of people in their 50s in the US lose their jobs at some point during that decade. And of that number, 10% get a job commensurate in pay and level with the one they were pushed out of. So what does that tell you? All those people did not suddenly become incompetent. Just all of a sudden, yet half the people became incompetent. So this is an age discrimination issue. And in some sectors, I have a new friend, young friend. She is in the tech industry and she's in her mid 30s and is already weighing in age discrimination and feeling it in her like early to mid 30s. So I feel that because I've been Black and a woman my whole life, you know, been female my whole life, that the age is the thing that starts to be different at this stage because I've had, affiliations with big companies. I've had big jobs before as an African-American woman. There's something in this age piece that puts a different, and it might be the cumulative effect of gender, race, and age, but that age piece. And I think especially one of the things, some of the most poignant stories in my book are from white men. And for many of them, what they'll say to me, this is their first ism. Okay. The first time they will walk into a room at a certain age and people have a preconceived opinion about their capability. That was not, I think as women, we're sort of used to that. As a Black person, I'm kind of used to that. So with ageism, okay, we've seen this before. But if that hasn't happened to you, it is, and suddenly younger men are getting promoted ahead of you. Suddenly you're not getting the promotion that you used to be on track for. There's a lot there to process.
Mm-hmm. That was great. Aisha, you're up.
Oh, hey guys, I'm coming in late, so please forgive me if we covered some of this already, but I'm greeting everyone, and I was wondering how we talked about the kinship gap. It's actually a situation where family members who would often provide medical, emotional, financial support, as we age, that support system is no longer there. And it's more exacerbated, again, for women of color. We've been without a partner for a variety of reasons, maybe our success, the culture, the social landscape. We've been able to move farther away from, if you will, the nuclear families or extended families by blood. And that means that we may have even ultimately wound up without a partner, without children, without our siblings or parents who are still alive. But these kinds of gaps are occurring even at a higher rate for us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any insight or anything you'd like to share with us on that? I mean, it always seems, of course, people of color have a little extra work to do.
Yeah, I think I read that Black women are the most unmarried group of women as a group. But this, what they call elder orphans, is a phenomenon. It's something like a third of people, I think it's either over 60 or 65, are living alone. That is one of the biggest household groups. And, I was talking a little bit at the end about the Golden Girls Act and just the beginning of a community response or government response to changing some of the legislation that prevents boarding houses, what they consider unrelated adults living together. They're communities who you can't do that. And they're realizing that because people, for all the reasons you said, parents have died, you moved away from, other relatives, or there might be some issue with estrangement, all of it, that having people live together in the legislation that's being considered here in DC, there's even a proposal that some money be attached to it to like renovate the house, make them age safe, some of these kinds of things. Right. For a group of not only women, but it could be a group of men and women who want to live together. Because I think there's the families that we're born with, and then there are the families that we choose. And we've all had situations where some of the chosen family we might actually be closer to, have more in common with. And I think there is room to help us have these conversations. So there are many women friends of mine who have had on their agenda of something to talk about. How might we buy a house together? How might we live together? But there's sort of really no roadmap to do it. And I think there are a lot of people who they don't want to be, all on top of each other, but a situation where we pool resources. And I think even talking to developers about designing houses that are not made, are not made for the traditional family of a master bedroom that's bigger than the other 2 bedrooms for the kids, where you start building houses where each bedroom has a bathroom. The bedrooms are of comparable size. So thinking about household size, how people are living now, that many people to survive are going to have to join together. And what does that look like in terms of real estate and look at like in terms of housing? So I think we're just on the front edge of having these conversations. The model that you hear about is not older adults like us on this call. It's still all about decline and frailty, and that's the way old age has been talked about since the Older Americans Act of 1965. And we really need new framing that is realistic of all the ways we're aging now.
So good. This is one of my favorite topics. I could talk about this all day because I'm all about this as well. There's a company called Silvernest. I just threw in the chat.
Yes.
Unpaid caregiving, the cost that is a tie into this as well, that many are in that generation where they're having to stop working to take care of an aging parent with Alzheimer's. And then they're not in the workforce for that, and they're not getting paid for that, and not wanting to have that happen when they get older. So this is all so great. I'm going to give Linda and Paula the last words today. So Linda, you're up, my friend. Good to see you.
Hey, Carrie, how are you? Actually, I don't need to, what I had, she already addressed. Me and my DEI lens, I was going to ask Elizabeth some thoughts about unconventional partnerships in terms of people with disabilities and what that might look like from a housing perspective, but she touched on it, and I'm okay with that. It was she kind of went where I wanted.
Yay.
So,
awesome.
Thank you.
Great. This is just the tip of the iceberg, as I think everyone knows. There's this collective desire, and then how do we make it happen, and how do we make it age friendly, being able to age in place. It's all there. So thank you, Linda. It's always good to have you. All right, Paula, take us home, girl.
Oh, just a quick one. I just want to thank you, Elizabeth, for just the reality check, because it's frightening to actually be there, that we're not alone in this process, but it's really frightening when you think about where will I age? And like you said, having gone through the situation when you have a parent and you go through that process. And I want to be in a space where there's hope, and that we can proactively, now that we are active minds and able bodies and those components, that we really do move from this conversation to what can we actually do as activists in our individual way that we can make impact.
So for me, this kind of call, MEA, is about the hopeful reframing of what it means in MEA's language to be a modern elder. And there is some self-selection to people who join a call like this, who come to MEA, and our tribe is here. The people who are looking for something other than kind of what the narrative is and the way you used to do it. And it is, how do we then continue to collaborate together, there could be a group of people on this call or some other calls who live in an area where they could consider living together. I definitely feel there is a business opportunity for somebody who can do that kind of matchmaking, who can, you hear among women friends, I know, could we live together? What do we need to think about? How would we do it? What would the ownership look like? So I think I'm optimistic about what's bubbling up from the ground. Sort of, it's gonna take, the cavalry is not coming on this. There's no, it's gonna be slower there. I mean, I think if the right talk could be had with President Biden, who is what, 78, 79 now, I would really like to see him. He would be ideal to sort of lead the charge on this. So often though, we've all been in situations where there's a woman who won't keep her heel in the door. You know, she gets over the drawbridge and winds it up. We know Black people like that, and we know old people like that. Because it takes something to stand in this space of our age and embrace that we are old. And we live in a culture where, you know, nobody wants to, I'm like loving your gray hair. I'm feeling like, okay. But that's, you know, this is still a journey. So where we find community of like-minded people, I think that's where we start really with our advocacy.
Mm-hmm. How many of you guys, this is the first time you've heard Elizabeth talk? Raise your hand. Whoa, like, was that amazing? So insightful. And the chat, everybody is just filling it up here with, you guys have so many questions. We're running out of time. All right, I will give you guys like 1 minute. I'll put Paula's hands down. Jean, and where did you go? Who else just put up their hand? Where'd you go? I don't want to lose you. Where'd you go? Go ahead there. Where'd all your hands go? I'll give you one more sec. Who wanted to say something? I lost you. All right, well, with that then, I'm gonna let you guys jump out. I am hearing how much everyone's enjoying these conversations. And we had a conversation on Saturday that was about overcoming burnout. And we talked about experiences of moral injury from Chris Murchison, which is such a powerful word. It was a way to like make sense of all that we've been dealing with reckoning with racism and climate change and political polarization and the pandemic, and that there's just so much. And now being able to have these really important conversations is what we're all hungry for. And I think that's why Elizabeth created those resilience circles back at the beginning, was to have a place to have conversations about the not so pleasant things. So yes, we're going to continue to have more of these conversations. I'm hearing it in the chat, and Elizabeth gave a great interview with Chip in the MEA online program, but don't you worry, we have all sorts of plans of more to come because there's so much more to share. So Elizabeth, a couple people asked me privately if they could get in touch with you. Are you willing to share a contact for folks to reach out to you?
Yes, so it is ebeth, EBETH, at 55, the number, and fakingnormal.com. And put in the subject, the subject, MEA Mastery Hour, and then I'll know. And so the thing I would say, when I wrote the book, how would I even put it? I wanted it to feel like I'm sitting next to you having a cup of coffee. I wanted to have enough in there about what has happened and why we've landed here. And then what are some of the resources that are out there? I wanted to summarize the kinds of questions my resilience circle, the things we were grappling with, how to form a resilience circle. And so at the end of each chapter, I put, here are the kinds of questions you might ask. If you go through the book with your resilience circle, here are the questions to get you started, and then you'll have some of your own. So it was intended to be a survival manual for people who landed here. When I looked for books, they were all like Brookings Institute tomes and this dry, for the policy people. There was nothing that if you're here, you landed here, you're feeling all the upset. What's the play for us? And that's what 55 Underemployed and Faking Normal is about. And I'm so looking forward to collaborating with MEA and kind of seeing how we can unbundle, because we touched on a lot of things here, but any one of them we could really drill down. And we're at a point, at an age and stage where we have to start drilling down on these points. And how do we share information? I'll hear about this program, but you've heard about other programs. We need to start bringing together what we know as well.
Amen. Preach, right? That was it. That we're about building a movement, and every voice is so integral in the movement. And Elizabeth, that's why I love her. She lays it all out clear. So those of you who are in MEA who want to do a little book club and go through this together, we can totally do that. You know, we're here behind the scenes to be in service to this movement. And I've been so grateful for Elizabeth's generosity in engaging and inspiring this community to keep having these conversations and keep going. Can I put Chip's interview in the chat? No, because you have to take MEA Online. Hello. And if you have MEA, oh, it's you. Bonnie's like, it's me. Yes, I'll find it for you, sweetheart. It's in the course, but I'll find it for you because you're my Bonnie. All right, so everybody, let's give a little, polish that pearl of wisdom that we got with Elizabeth White today. And Chip, man, that was so awesome. I was super excited for this today. And thank you all. So the recording for this will be up on the portal. Everybody who registered for this call will also get a follow-up with the recording, and then the chat is also in there. So you can come back, because this was a super active chat group here today. There's a lot of good resources and links in there. So when you get the recording, you can scroll through that chat yourself, and then you'll see all those links that you can pick up. You also can download the chat by yourself if you want to. If you want it right now, go to those 3 dots on the bottom where the chat is, and it can show you that you can save the chat yourself. So feel free to do that. And we do these once a month, and we moved it back into the Mastery Hour because it was just too good. So thank you for giving us the whole hour, everybody. And thank you again, Elizabeth. And go make a difference out there in the world. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Awesome,
See you
Elizabeth.
guys. Bye.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank
It was
you.
excellent.
Thank you, Elizabeth.